What's going on, guys? Lon here from Android Authority, and today we're going to take a look at the Oppo F9. And Oppo's been doing some pretty interesting things with their smartphones lately. We had the Find X that came out a few months ago with the rising cameras and the facial recognition stuff. And now we have the F9, and the F9 is not quite as powerful as the Find X, but it does do a couple of pretty interesting things. The first thing is the new water drop notch, and this notch is a lot smaller than notches that we see on other smartphones. This is probably the smallest notch that we've seen since the Essential phone, and it's called a water drop notch because it kind of looks like a water drop. And the engineering behind this is actually pretty clever. It only houses the front-facing camera, and that's basically how they were able to make this notch so small, whereas other notches typically have the front-facing camera, a few other sensors, and the earpiece. And this phone still has an earpiece, but it's been cleverly repositioned into the outer bezel of the phone. So that's how this notch is as small as it is. And I'm personally not a big fan of notches, but I do like the way this notch looks. It is one of the more attractive looking notches out there, and it takes up a lot less space on your screen. The screen itself is a 6.3-inch LCD display with 1080p resolution, and it's a pretty good looking screen. It goes nearly edge to edge. It has pretty vibrant colors and excellent viewing angles. But the other thing that's interesting about this screen is that it actually uses Gorilla Glass 6, and it's the first smartphone to have Gorilla Glass 6. And this is supposedly Corning's most durable glass to date. Corning says it can survive an average of 15 drops of 1 meter in height, which sounds pretty impressive. I didn't actually drop this phone to test that though, so I'm just gonna take Corning's word for it. The other thing that might catch your attention with this phone is the colors that it comes in. So the version that I have is called Sunrise Red, which starts off as a red and then fades into purple. And if you look at this phone at an angle, you'll notice this very unique diamond pattern. And I actually like the way this phone looks simply because of the color. But if you're not really into the bright red and bright purple, it also comes in a blue version that starts off as blue and fades into black and also has the same diamond pattern. Aside from the notch and the unique color options that you get with this phone, there's not really a whole lot going on with the F9. The design is very iPhone-y, but it doesn't feel like an iPhone. It's not made of metal or glass. It's actually made of plastic, which is perfectly fine because plastic is still a very sturdy material. It's just not gonna have that luxurious feel that you would get from metal or glass. It also has a headphone jack, which is good to see in 2018, but oddly enough, it comes with a micro USB port instead of USB Type-C. But that micro USB port does support VOOC fast charging. And if you're not familiar with VOOC fast charging, it's pretty much the same thing as dash charging that we see on OnePlus phones, which is very good to see on the F9 because this phone does have a pretty decently sized battery at 3,500 milliamp hours. So it's very quick to charge, and that big battery does get this phone through a full day perfectly fine. I've had no issues with the battery life on this phone. I would show you screen on time numbers, but Oppo software doesn't necessarily make it easy to show those numbers. Now on the inside, the Oppo F9 has a MediaTek processor with either 4 or 6 gigabytes of RAM, and generally performance on this phone is pretty good. It's pretty smooth when launching applications, browsing the web, or multitasking, but where it starts to bog down is with gaming. Even really simple games like Clash Royale was a choppy and laggy experience. And this phone has a dedicated gaming mode built into the software that is supposed to make gaming a really good experience, but I didn't actually notice a difference with this turned on or off, so I just ended up leaving it off entirely. So I'm not exactly sure what the bottleneck is here when it comes to the gaming performance on the F9. Like pretty much every other smartphone on the market, the Oppo F9 has dual cameras on the back. You have a primary 16 megapixel shooter that's paired with a 2 megapixel depth sensor for portrait mode effects. And on the front, you have a whopping 25 megapixel camera, which is pretty nice for selfies, especially if you want to zoom and crop. You can do that without losing a whole lot of detail. And the front-facing camera is pretty good. It also comes with an AI beauty mode, but I wasn't really a fan of this. I kind of felt it was a little bit too aggressive in softening the details in your face, so I just left this feature turned off. Image quality from the rear camera I would say is okay at best. In good lighting conditions, you can get some images with great color, good dynamic range, and pretty good detail, but the camera is pretty quick to fall apart in low light. Images start to look really muddy, and there's not a whole lot of detail in the highlights, but I wasn't really too surprised by this considering the lack of optical image stabilization. My least favorite part about the Oppo F9 would have to be the software. It's running Android 8.1 Oreo, which is fine, but it has ColorOS sitting on top of it, which is an extremely heavy skin and also mimics a lot of the things that we see in Apple's iOS, like the way the icons look, the wallpapers, and the features. And there's certain things that ColorOS changes from stock Android that don't necessarily feel that intuitive, like the notifications, for example. You can't just simply swipe them away to dismiss them. Instead, you have to swipe it to the left and hit the trash can icon to dismiss a notification, and this just feels very slow and clunky when compared to the way that stock Android handles them. The last thing that you're probably going to want to know about the Oppo F9 is its availability. It's not coming to the US, and I probably would never expect it to. It's only available in a few select regions like Vietnam, the Philippines, and India. And even if you could get your hands on one, I wouldn't recommend it because it doesn't support US LTE bands. So that is the Oppo F9 in a nutshell. It has some pretty cool color options and a very unique notch, but otherwise it's a pretty average smartphone. But it's still really cool to see that Oppo is continuing to do very innovative things with their smartphones. But that's pretty much it for this review. Hopefully you all enjoyed it. If you did, please give it a thumbs up down below. We definitely appreciate it. Subscribe to the channel, which is also down below if you haven't already. And of course, check us out on social media. All that good stuff is linked down below. And check the website as well, AndroidAuthority.com, because we are your source for all things Android.